All right, so we showed you this earlier before we got to the White House briefing, but we want to go back now to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent testifying. Here he is right there on your screen. He is testifying on the fiscal year 26 budget before the House Ways Means Committee there in Washington, D.C. Let's take a listen in.
Fiscal year. But this reconciliation bill is set to increase that to over $4 trillion by the end of the decade, and it could send interest costs higher than $2 trillion by 2034. This would consume nearly 1/3 of all government revenue. The CBO said the reconciliation bill would increase the deficit by $3 trillion. A reasonable federal budget committee estimates $5 trillion. Penn Wharton estimates $5.8 trillion. I get the warnings of rising debt and rising debt eventually causing an economic calamity, but it's already hurting the economy now, as we're seeing higher interest rates, higher mortgage rates, and we very well may see elevated inflation and a drag on economic growth. Now, under the current debt trends, real income growth is projected to slow by 10% in the next 30 years. But if the debt rapidly rises, income growth could decline by 30%. Secretary, in your confirmation testimony, you stated that we must get our fiscal house in order. And you've talked about the national debt as a security problem in the past. Is this still your view?
Congressman, could I ask where those numbers came from?
I will get that to you, but I have those in my preparation.
Okay,
happy to get those to you. Once again, I hope it is still your view. I'm out of time, but I really hope it is still your view. And I hope that you not only support trade deals that deal with Congress, I hope that you support a bipartisan fiscal commission where Democrats and Republicans can actually come together, sit at the table, and actually work together on reducing our debt and deficit. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I yield back.
You know what, Mr. Secretary, I'm going to give you some opportunity to answer a question.
Which question?
Well, I know you're wondering where the figures came from. You need to know where the figures came from.
As I've said before, when I look in the mirror in the morning, I see a deficit hawk, and they support everything to consolidate this debt, stabilize the debt to GDP, and bring down that ratio in a controlled manner. We didn't get here overnight. We're not going to fix it overnight. I would like to fix it by the end of President Trump's term.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Peenstreet, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Secretary Bessent, thank you for being in front of us today, Ways and Means. I consider myself a novice in economics. I love to read it and work through it, even teach it once in a while. And I appreciate all that you've done under this administration. I live in rural Iowa. You live, I think, in rural South Carolina, and we love our areas that we live in. And for me, President Trump won rural America by about 90%. There's an ultimatum, the way I see it, an ultimatum on what we need to change in government to make America great again. And I'd like to talk about that as we look forward and as you're in your role, and we have this big, beautiful bill that's coming out. Can you talk a little bit about, for Iowa or South Carolina, how this bill will grow our states economically? And I think about, immediate expensing, things like this. Can you just tell the public saying, all right, this is how this is going to be economics on steroids?
With pleasure. So, and I think it's a multi-pronged approach. I would go back to the small and community banks, because as I said, small and community banks finance 70% of ag loans, so we are working to stabilize and unshackle them. The tax bill, farm structures would count for immediate expensing in the tax bill, as would any farm equipment that would increase the efficiencies.
179 depreciation, you name it.
And as you know, most farms are set up as pass-through corporations. Right. And again, these people, I think, do not consider themselves, are not the ones being stereotyped and lampooned by the other side of the aisle here. These are hardworking people who, they do manual labor, they keep their books, they buy equipment, they make business decisions, and I think that the certainty and the permanence here is going to be very, very important.
It's invaluable.
To know that it is going to be there. And as I said, many business owners with whom I've spoken are holding back on the expenditures.
Right.
And I'm glad you mentioned 90% of the farmers who supported President Trump. I actually, within the past 48 hours, with my Chinese counterpart, I told the Vice Premier that you did not make good on your ag purchases,
right.
and President Trump's #1 constituency, they are our farmers, and we expect that that will be made good.
Thank you, Secretary Bessent. Thank you. I mean that. I mean, our commodity prices, soybeans and corns, we rely on these export markets. And if Brazil and Argentina takes over these markets, we're in deep trouble. So I'm very grateful for that. And just talking about tariffs a little bit, we've been taken advantage of for decades. So now as we move forward, we're trying to create a level playing field. And you talked about certainty. Can you just extrapolate on that just a little bit so for small business or large manufacturers or whatever, they just want certainty. How does this project out over the next 6 to 12 months?
So I think, as I've said many times, this administration's economic program is a three-legged stool: trade, tax, and deregulation. Yep. The trade has moved faster because the president has used IEPA, an emergency power. Tax, I congratulate everyone in the Republican side of moving the one big beautiful bill through the House with Speaker Johnson's leadership. And we are working with your Senate colleagues. Senator Thune has given the date of July 4th. We'll see. And then deregulation, I think, is both the regulation of the Biden administration acted as a tax, and it acted as an expense on the American people per household, and it slowed economic growth.
Yes.
And I believe that as these regulations come off, whether it is permitting, whether it for ag, whether it is water usage, whether it is the environmental, that those will kick in the third, fourth quarter, and by 2026 will really take off. So I think on trade we want to move quickly, but these are big issues, and we want to do it right.
Yep.
And as I said, there are 18 important trading partners. We will get those, and I think we can have certainty there, but the real certainty we need is this tax bill.
Yep. Thank you, Secretary Bessent, and thank you and Trump for all you do. This is incredible, and we're going to have a great economic future as we move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Malliotakis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here. Under the previous Biden administration, we had 0 trade deals. And in just 5 months, we're seeing more cooperation from Mexico and Canada as it relates to the border and fentanyl. UK, you have a trade deal there. China, we have a framework. Congratulations on the success in last night's meeting. India, Japan, they are now at the table, as are dozens of other countries. And I think it's really important as we approach that July 9th date there for lifting the hold or the pause on the tariffs, that we take into account that we do have these partners who are working with us in good faith. And I hope and I urge the administration to not reinstate the tariffs for the nations that are at the table, that are working with us to reduce the tariffs, the trade deficits, and increase our market access for our products. And I would just like to get your opinion on that, if you agree that we should have a more targeted approach. Let's focus on the most egregious offenders who are not as willing to work with us to rectify that.
Well, we are focusing on the most egregious, and there, as I've said, there are 18 important trading partners. Most of them account for approximately north of 90% of the trade deficit. So our largest trading partners are, many of them, the biggest problem. Many of them have, as I've said, have come with good offers and are working in good faith. It will be up to President Trump, but it is my belief that if someone is negotiating in good faith, that an extension will be possible.
That's great news.
And in conversations with USTR Ambassador Greer. It's my belief that with smaller countries where we have lower levels of trade, we may be able to do a one-size-fits-all regional deal. So that would cover a great deal of ground on
That's
dozens,
great, and
dozens of countries.
I wish you a lot of success there, and I appreciate that. And if I also want to keep in mind that if we want to build in America, as the President, as you, as I, and this committee wants to do, we need to make sure that we have access to parts and supplies from abroad. So let's keep that in mind as well as we're moving forward with the tariff discussions. I'm concerned about tariffs on pharmaceuticals. In particular, it's an access issue, it's an affordability issue, it's a national security issue. As you know, right now we're relying heavily on foreign countries, particularly communist China. But domestic pharmaceutical production requires long-term investment, and to establish a secure and self-reliant supply chain here at home, it's something that you can't just flip the switch on. It does take time. And certainly the provisions you mentioned earlier that we put in our one big beautiful bill will help us get there, incentivize, expand facilities, build new facilities. But until we reach that full domestic production capability, the U.S. remains dangerously dependent on foreign sources for life-saving medicines and medical inputs. And so I hope that, we'll take that into account when we look at tariffs and not place tariffs on pharmaceuticals that we desperately need here in the United States. I, alongside with my colleague, Congressman Schneider, we introduced bipartisan legislation, H.R. 2213, the Medical Supply Chain Resiliency Act. And we learned from COVID that we must, obviously, that our supply chain is too fragile, and we need to do what we can to make it more accessible, these pharmaceuticals. My legislation would address this by enhancing the President's ability to negotiate trade agreements with trusted trade partners to reduce or eliminate tariffs, quotas, and other barriers that create a disincentive to manufacturing here in the United States. It would ensure that critical medical goods and supplies and services are delivered safely, quickly, efficiently to patients here at home. And I hope that you will take a look at this bill. It has some good bipartisan support, good industry support, and it really does complement what we did in the one big beautiful bill to incentivize and give the President that flexibility to negotiate with those trading partners.
Yeah, Congresswoman, I could not agree with you more. The only good outcome from COVID was it showed us our strategic deficiencies in areas like semiconductors and especially pharma. As you mentioned, a large part of our pharma does come from the PRC. That actually gives them negotiating leverage. I think it would be a tragic mistake if they were ever to flip off that switch, but it's always there. They could. They flipped off other switches. India, who is a more reliable, durable partner, is also a large supplier, but we do need to bring that home.
Well, great. I look forward to working with you on that, and an endorsement from you of my legislation would be very welcome.
Good. Thank you for your leadership on that.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Horsford.
Thank you, Chairman Smith, and to the ranking member. Mr. Secretary, good afternoon. Does taking health care away from 16 million Americans lower prices for working families, yes or no?
I'm not sure what that question means.
The bill, the big, beautiful bill that was passed by this committee and the majority of the Republicans in the House would eliminate health care for 16 million Americans. I'm asking, does that lower the cost for working families? Yes or no?
Again, which cost? Oil, fuel costs, food costs?
Household cost.
Sorry?
The cost that households have to cover every month. Middle class working people.
Again, I disagree with the characterization.
So the answer is no. The bill doesn't deal with that.
Well,
can you
that's your
name
answer.
one rural community whose hospital will be strengthened by this one big beautiful bill? Just one. Yes or no?
Again, I'm not HHS, but I will be happy to get to you on that.
I would appreciate that answer. 16 million people stand to lose health care. That's thousands of hospitals that will be affected. We're talking about jobs and families that will be impacted. Worse, we're dealing with these tariffs, which are taxes that Americans pay, which are raising the cost on medical equipment, putting further strain on rural hospitals in my district, but yet the billionaires under this plan will still get their tax break. Mr. Secretary, under the bill, who gets the most benefits? A billionaire with a complex tax return or a working parent with one W-2?
Under President Trump's first term, a greater...
Not the first term.
Well,
I'm asking under this bill.
Including this bill, in terms of percent, as opposed to absolute numbers, in terms of percent, working families will have a greater...
Well, in fact, Mr. Secretary, every credible outside estimator says that the wealthiest win under this proposal and working people and the poor lose. They pay more. Working people pay more. That's the story of this big, beautiful bill. Help the ultra-rich and leave everyone else paying the price. Are you yourself a beneficiary of any provision in this bill? Will you personally receive a tax cut under the provisions of under this bill?
Two things, Congressman.
Yes or no? It's
we had a referendum on November 5th, and
Mr.
working
Secretary,
Americans
yes or
voted
no?
for President
Reclaiming
Trump.
my time.
And
Reclaiming my time, Mr. Chairman.
Two,
Mr. Chairman, I'm reclaiming my time.
And two...
So, Mr. Secretary, it's my time, Mr. Secretary. I'm asking you a yes or no question.
I'm trying to answer you, and...
It's a yes or no question.
Saying it louder does not elicit an answer.
Well, not answering the question at all proves that you're evasive. Are you the head, the person that's the head of overseeing the implementation of our tax code, a beneficiary under the provisions of, any provisions of this bill?
Again, this is an extension of an existing bill.
So are you a beneficiary?
This is an extension.
Okay, I will
If you want to
take that as a no. Mr. Secretary,
question.
Did the TCJA help increase the supply of housing? Yes or no?
Sorry?
Did the TCJA help increase the supply of housing? Yes or no?
I don't know. And
According to the Federal Reserve of Philadelphia, comparing the pre- and post-TCJA housing market, they found that between January of 2015 to October of 2019, housing construction, in fact, slowed under TCJA. So, Mr. Secretary, do tariffs on steel, aluminum, and lumber raise the cost of construction? Yes or no?
Again, on the housing point, the interest rates went up because the economy was stronger.
And under this proposal...
Inflation was nascent.
And under a budget report that just came out from the Yale Budget Lab, they just released data showing that because of the debt that is going to be added by this big, ugly bill, mortgage rates will increase. Are you aware of that?
I'm aware that...
This bill is a disaster for the people of Nevada who are struggling with the cost of rent and the ability to afford housing. These are the pressing issues that my constituents are concerned about, and I hope that this administration understands the impact of the negative consequences of their proposal.
This administration very much understands
the
impacts on working Americans, and that's why working Americans voted for President Trump.
Mr. Kerry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the Secretary. Number one, I just want to be clear, and I already know the answer to this, but it's a yes or no. Are you making more money today than you were when you were in the private sector?
Less.
No, I know that.
And just to be clear, too,
Yeah.
in 2017, when TCJA was enacted,
You're watching Live Impact News on WCNC Plus. I'm Nick Sertivant. Right there on your screen live is Secretary Bessent, Scott Bessent, testifying in front of a House committee on the fiscal year 2026 budget that's happening there in Washington, D.C.